Hello everybody, we are going to be working on Unit 4 today, and Unit 4's main goal is to work through Chapter 4 in our book, which covers graphics, visual elements, and some additional CSS stuff. I also want to talk a little bit about coding tools, and prior to hitting record on the video here, we were doing a little bit of discussion about that in class. So I want to go through a list of real popular editors that you guys could use for free, and then also show you a couple of tools that actually cost money and why they cost money, and then you guys can choose for yourself what tool you want to use. Okay, so it's a matter of opinion and preference, frankly, and what I would encourage you to do as students is, frankly, to try a whole bunch of them, right, and see how they go. I do hear from students what they seem to like best. It doesn't always match up with what I like best, but you know what? Everybody's got their impetus for choosing what they choose. So far in class here, we've just been using Notepad++. I'm just going to pull that up on the screen. And you know, Notepad++ is a great tool. First of all, it's free. It does a whole lot more than Notepad does. And it has syntax coding and color coding built into it to support just about every programming language that you can think of. And ones that you probably never even knew existed. And Notepad++. It also has the ability, believe it or not, it has a built-in FTP tool. We haven't touched that, right? I'm not a huge fan of it, that's why. It also can support extendable plugins. So for example, if you were coding in Java, and this is actually some code that you're seeing up on the screen now, this is from my class that we were teaching last night. Teaching GUI programming in Java, and you can see that it supports Java, right? But it doesn't necessarily run a console inside the environment like you would in like Eclipse or NetBeans or something like that. However, there are people that create plugins for Notepad++ that do exactly that and create little panels on the side where you can run your code right inside the environment. For the HTML stuff that we've done so far, you guys figured out already that you can go to the Run menu and then have it, load up in a browser directly. So really, this can be your one-stop solution if that's really what you choose. Okay, but frankly, it is just a fancy text editor that has some cool features. This is actually a product that was developed for Linux platforms, not for Windows. But because of its popularity on that platform, we find that it works great on Windows. I believe they might also have a Mac version, but don't quote me on that. You'll have to explore that. I've never loaded it on my Mac because when I was working on a Mac, I always preferred different tools. Usually on a Mac, what I would typically use is a product called Text Wrangler, but I've changed my mindset on it recently. I've kind of stepped away from that product for a couple of reasons. Mostly the way that they do their licensing, I think, is a little annoying now. But I'm going to start popping in a couple of websites here where there's some tools that you can download for free. And I'm hoping that you guys, at least those that have your laptops here, actually go through the process of installing these and maybe picking one to work with today. So the first one I'm going to point out is a product called Brackets. The URL for it is brackets.io, and it is a complete freeware code editor. It is very similar in principle to what we have with Notepad++. In other words, it supports many different languages, but really the main focus is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That's what really it was built to do. I'm not even sure that I have it loaded on this laptop, so I'm actually going to yeah, I don't. So you know what? I'm going to go ahead and download it for myself because I don't have it on this machine. But as I download it and go through the install process, I'm just tell you a little bit of where this comes from. Adobe, the company that makes Photoshop and Illustrator and a lot of those products, Lightroom, and their big HTML editor, Dreamweaver. And in fact, when I was working professionally in the field, a decade or so ago, Dreamweaver was the product. If you were a pro, that's what you were using. And unfortunately, it was mostly a Mac-based product. And then Adobe got smart and started making it for PC as well. And you know what? I still love using that tool. I don't use it as much as I used to. And one of the reasons a lot of people have shied away from it is it costs money. In the old days, it was kind of easy to hack Adobe products, frankly. You could download trial versions and you'd figure out which files to hack and you had a free version, right? So, but then Adobe got smart and turned it into a subscription-based thing. So if you are using anything in their product set now, you have to pay a monthly subscription. You know what? If you're a professional, frankly, it's not cheap. For a pro, it's like 50 to 60 bucks a month. As students, you can get it as cheap as, I think, $25 to $30 a month. Yeah, it's still kind of ridiculous. You know, and I was just about ready to cancel my subscription, frankly. But now my daughter is at a high school of the arts in Milwaukee, and so she's using it to do a lot of her stuff. And my son's also taking some photography classes, so he's using it too. So now I have a reason to keep it again, because otherwise they would each be asking for their own subscription. And I'm like, well, I got one subscription and we can just share, right? And honestly, you know, even if you only use one or two of the products inside the Adobe Creative Cloud, Photoshop alone, you know, I mean, that's kind of like the tool for doing graphics. If you're doing animations, Adobe Animate is kind of like the tool. So I think they're all really useful. And frankly, I think it's a great collection of products, really worth the money, but the price is enough to make a lot of people shy away. We can't force students to spend money on software, so we've kind of moved that out of our program about 10 years ago. But what Adobe did is they realized, well, holy cow, now all these web coders aren't using our product anymore because it costs money. So they're leaving our product base, you know. So what they did is they actually developed this free editor called Brackets, which is built on the same engine as Dreamweaver. So that's why I really like it. So it has some Dreamweaver-like features, but it really is more of its own product. So right now I'm going through the install process here, and hopefully it's not a real lengthy one. So you're watching, you know, it's like kind of like watching paint dry here, but you know, since we're talking about it, Let's let it install and load up. It does support many languages, like I said, and it is a text editor, but what you'll notice right away when you start using this product is it does some things that Notepad++ doesn't. So Notepad++ does a little bit of what we call AutoSense or IntelliSense, which means as you're typing in something, it tries to anticipate what's next. So if you start typing like, you know, a paragraph tag, for example, it's like, oh, you're typing a paragraph tag. I can close that for you right away. Or you're typing something with double quotes. I'll close the double quotes for you right away. Or, hey, you're picking a color. Here's a color palette. Pick the color. So I don't have to go to a color picker and do it. It does it all built in. So I like this product a lot. With the students I've shown it to, there's a very large percentage that ultimately choose this one as their de facto code editor for doing basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The other really nice thing about it is it has this little lightning bolt here up in the corner of their window, and what that does is it live broadcasts whatever you're doing in the editor window directly to a browser. So you can see, like if you change your text in the editor, you can see it in the browser right away. So I think that's really cool. But the fill-in features that it does, I think are kind of worth the price of admission. I'm going to bring it up on screen here real quick, just to give you a little bit of a preview. So this is what the product looks like when it's running. You see they already have a web page in there. And I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit if it allows me to. I'm doing a Control+ to do that. And you can see they have a web page already preloaded that comes with the product, and you know, I can actually look at that in the browser by just clicking the little thing. Yeah, we'll only see this message once. Thank you very much. It's going to load up, should load up my default browser, which is Chrome, and it'll show you the content live in the browser. So the code that you're seeing in the window right now is what's making up this page. So just a little overview of how the thing works, but if you just click in here and maybe just type in a little bit of your own code just to try it. So like I put in a paragraph tag, you see how it like brings up a list of all the possible tags? The moment I hit a bracket, I have all the HTML tags already listed. Right? close it, closes itself automatically. Won't forget, right? I know. Frankly, it is kind of amazing, and I really like that because you can do stuff like this, where I can like put in a style, and I might say color, and notice that it gives me a whole list of colors here. I think I'll go with the dark orchid today, and there it is, So this is just a really quick preview of the product. It also, updates it in real time in the browser. You hit that little preview button, and there's ways to have it like live sync. I don't know where I dropped the code, and it must be right up at the top. Oh, I didn't type any text in, right? So here, let me do this. All I did is create an empty paragraph, so of course it's not going to show, but I can just type in, and you see it just shows up in the browser right away. So it's kind of like instantaneous refresh without refreshing. And I'm like split screening Windows, right? And you can do that with Windows. But if you work on like a dual monitor system, it's really cool because you can just take one monitor and it just have your browser up, and then in the other window you have your code up. It's a wonderful thing. It works natively with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I forget what other languages are automatically included, probably like PHP and ASP mostly. But you can import plugins and extensions for so many different things. It's kind of mind-boggling because it's an open source code kind of tool. So they constantly update and improve it, and it's completely free. It's not Dreamweaver, right? But at the same time, it's pretty darn close without having to pay all the money that you pay to get it. So one of my favorites, highly recommended. All right. I'm not going to save. Did I get an option to not save? Don't save. Okay. All right. So I can get that browser window out of the way. Let's go to another tool that I think is really cool. I'm going to go to actually see if I can type it. Go get a tool from Microsoft. In fact, Microsoft has like their main code editing tool, the big professional product is called Visual Studio. And that one can do HTML as well. And you guys as students can get it for free. But frankly, for doing web work, it's almost too much stuff. It's almost like too big of a product for doing HTML work. So what Microsoft did is they developed this other alternative product called Visual Studio Code. And Visual Studio Code kind of fits into the same category as Brackets and Notepad++. And once again, this is an open source tool. I believe I do have this one installed on here, so let me just, maybe not. Yeah, Visual Studio. Okay, I don't have this one installed either, so guess what I'm going to do, folks? This is like my opportunity to install the software. And what's really wonderful about this product, very much like Brackets in a way, once again it supports many languages, lots of plugins. Because it's open source, people are really, really heavy on this product right now. And I don't know how many of you have heard of it or tried it. But it seems that a lot of people are just switching to it. And one of the reasons they're doing it is because it also runs on Macs. It also runs on Linux machines as well. And on all my Mac systems, and I have 3 or 4 of them that I run, this is my go-to editor now. It used to be Text Wrangler, and I used to use Sublime too, but I've kind of almost completely switched to this. Because I like it so much. And it looks good, it behaves well, and you know what, it's completely extensible, and out of all the open source editors right now, this one seems to be the hottest one in growth. And for multi-platform people, and Joe, I'm looking at you because I know you're using a MacBook over there, it might be your go-to tool on a Mac platform for doing a lot of this work. So I'm going to go ahead and do the install on it. There's nothing too fancy about the install. I don't want a desktop icon, whatever. All right. Next, install, agree, okay. Oh, what did I just agree to? You know what? That's the other way you get burned, right? Whenever you get free software, you got to read those screens. I'm pretty confident that this one doesn't install junk, but there's some products, even ones that I like, that do install junk. So always read your screens carefully. Lakita.
So I do have it. I just haven't played around with it. Is it one of the ones that you think take a little bit of time you have to get used to? Or?
Visual Studio Code.
Yes.
You know, there's always a learning curve with the product, no doubt. I don't think it's that bad with this product, though. I mean, you know, and frankly, it's a little bit of a preference. And I'm going to go ahead and launch it so you guys can see the interface on this. They go kind of with a dark mode on it. All right. Okay. So they're kind of bringing up the screen here, but I actually want to get to the product. So this is what the product looks like when you launch it. And I'm going to close the welcome screen, and I can go ahead and let's say create a new file. Do a save as, and I'm just goofing around here, so nothing serious. Creating an HTML file, and then you can start doing your, notice the auto type on this too. I just type like a bracket and a D, and it's pulling it up, and then I'm going to type in like the head. There it is. Close it. Closes it automatically. Yada yada yada. So a lot of the same kind of features as brackets. There's a really strong movement on this product right now, and I might not be as huge on it as other people are, but you know what? This is one to pay attention to, and it's a really, it's free, doesn't take a lot of space, it's a good one to have in your arsenal, frankly. So if you don't like the look of Notepad++, for example, you might really prefer this product. For multi-platform people, if you run on Linux or a Mac, this might be your go-to tool. That would be my recommendation, at least for a basic text editor. All right, so that's Visual Studio Code. Another one that you might want to explore is by a company called JetBrains. And JetBrains is a company that is really kind of on the move. And they make a bunch of different products. And the one that I'm going to point you guys to as students is the one called Webstorm, right here. And this, wow, look at that cool animation, huh? That's all probably done with JavaScript. Right. I'm just moving my mouse around. That's how it's pretty groovy. All right. But they make a bunch of different what we call IDEs. Now, what that acronym stands for, folks, IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. And their big product is the product called IntelliJ IDEA. So I know some of you right now are taking Java courses. If you're a full-time student in your first semester, that's one of our required courses. And usually we push students to use Eclipse or NetBeans as their IDE. But I might have you consider actually using IntelliJ as your Java editor because it's so cool. And I know a lot of people out in the field, and we were picking up this information from our advisory board the other night. Eclipse is probably still like the biggest Java tool out there, especially for enterprise developers. But I've been hearing from companies like Uline and Modine and S.C. Johnson are starting to move their developers over to IntelliJ. Now, for a professional developer, there's a little bit of an issue. Eclipse is free. IntelliJ is not. However, here's the beauty. As students, all the products from JetBrains are completely free. You just have to register. So the first thing I would do if you come to this site is come up here and create an account before you go downloading a product. And if you register with a .edu email account, like your student email account, you can get any of their products for free.
But do you have to return, will they stop working though, like the Office 365?
That's an excellent question. I don't know.
Okay.
Now I'm in the situation where my EDU email account doesn't expire, so I can't say. But you know what, Cordy, the mindset there is, if you go out into the field and you become a professional and you're making money and it maybe only costs a couple $100s for a tool you really like, it's like a carpenter buying a really nice $50 hammer instead of like the the one that you buy at the dollar store, right? You have to have good tools to do your work, right? Oh, yeah, well, and frankly, a lot of companies are changing their mindset about this as well, where they're not really charging for the products so much.
They're going to get you with the ads, right?
No, they don't. There's no ads in these products. But I do really strongly recommend the product called Webstorm that they have. You notice how they listed here, it says the smartest JavaScript IDE. So chances are when you guys take your JavaScript class in second semester, most likely that'll either be with Christian or Christopher. They're usually the ones that teach it. I know that Christian's really big on Webstorm for his students. So that's one that you might want to try out as well. The interesting thing is if you download the IntelliJ product, excuse me, that one also does what all their other products do. So the IntelliJ product is the one that's like Visual Studio. It does everything. It's all kind of built into the product. You just have to enable the languages. But if you're just doing web work, you might just want to choose Webstorm. When you take the PHP class, they also have a product called PHP Storm. And both of them are really excellent. I do have IntelliJ loaded up here, but I don't have enough time to like demonstrate every single product. But if there's like the products that I would recommend, those would probably be the ones I would go to first if I didn't have an editor on the machine. It would probably be a smattering of those. And in fact, I would recommend try them all. And then work a little bit with each one and see which one you like the workflow of best. Okay? I don't want to neglect the fact that I still think that perhaps one of the best products out there for doing this kind of work is Adobe Dreamweaver. And I do have it loaded up on this machine, and frankly, I really don't run it very often anymore. I would normally teach classes like this, and I would work inside the product because I want people to see what a real professional tool looks like when you're using it. And I know that in open source design houses, meaning people that tend to work more on the PHP side of things, this is still the de facto tool. What is amazing about this product is that it has built into it the capability, kind of like brackets, where you can kind of see what you're doing at the same time as you're editing, but it's all directly in the product without launching the browser. And it uses the Chrome rendering engine right inside the product to show you what you're doing. The autocomplete, the IntelliSense, the debugging, if you're doing like PHP or JavaScript, is superior to any of the other products, with maybe the exception, I think, of Visual Studio when you're doing JavaScript stuff. The unfortunate problem is it's not free. So, and I don't want to see students like dishing out money when they can't afford to do it. So if you can't afford, the Creative Cloud and Dreamweaver, brackets might be your better option, but you should always try all the different products. So.
VS Code also offers the preview.
Yeah, it does. It does. And thank you for mentioning that, Joe. So, and if I was to predict, I think that Visual Studio Code is probably the hottest product right now in terms of like growth. Of the free editors, which one might I use? I guess I would probably either use Visual Studio Code or brackets if I want more of a powerful tool. But a lot of times, if it's low-level work, I still kind of go to Notepad++, believe it or not, because it's just so lightweight. It launches quickly. It's easy to install. It always works. If I forget to save, it still saves, So I like those features. So frankly, folks, it's a matter of preference when it comes down to it. But what I would like you to do today, if you went through the trouble of installing whatever you installed, feel free to work in that product today. If not, you want to go back to Notepad++, that's absolutely fine too. I'm kind of debating in my head right now which product I'm going to use. I might, I'm thinking I might actually work in Dreamweaver to see, like, maybe get my Dreamweaver chops back. Are you guys okay with that? Because the code is just code, right? All right. All right. So I'm going to relaunch Dreamweaver and kind of get myself into this mindset here. I am working inside of Dreamweaver, and I have Dreamweaver set up with a site definition so that I can attach directly to the files that I've been working with and the folder that I've been working with. If you guys are using one of the manual editors, what you might opt to do is actually go to your file system first and just get yourself ready to do some work. So I put all my stuff inside this folder here for this semester. And as I did last week, what I recommend that you do, since we're going into Unit 4 now, and at least for me, I'm building off of what I did previously, I'm going to begin by actually replicating my Unit 3 folder. This might not work for you if you're doing like Java Jam and Fish Creek and all that stuff, or maybe it will. I don't know how you set up your folders, but for me, I'm going to make a copy of my Unit 3 and then paste it back in to the same folder and then rename it Unit 4. And what I just did is what I call primitive versioning. I just created a backup of my work, and now I'm going to do my work in Unit 4. Unit 3 I'm leaving alone. And if I screw up horribly, which sometimes happens, I can go back to Unit 3 and I'm good, right? I don't have to go all the way back to week 1. I'm just losing 1 week's worth of work instead of, you know, a whole bunch. So now I have that folder created. I'm going to move that window out of the way. I'm going to refresh this window here, and there it is. So now Unit 4 is appearing inside of Dreamweaver for me. And I'm going to go ahead and open up that folder, and I'm going to bring my index page up onto the screen. And I want to show you right away, at least in this tool, that it instantaneously puts me into both a code window where I can see my code, and it also shows me a preview version of what I'm creating as I'm working on it. For right now, I'm actually going to close the split screen view and just stay in code view. Code. Wow, I get 2 code windows. That's a new feature. How do I turn off the split screen? Oh, I guess I could just choose code. All right. And then I'm also going to bump up my font size here. And in Dreamweaver, I'm trying to remember where you do that. Fonts. It's a little cumbersome in this product. And I'm going to go up a couple clicks. Proportional font, okay. And then code font. And then I make them all a little bit larger so that way while we're in the classroom, you guys can see my screen a little better. And for me, that's important. Okay. I'm going to go now and bring up our chapter PowerPoint, which is linked up right at the top of the Unit 4 folder. And I'm going to start stepping through the slides. We got a bunch of slides to go through, a bunch of stuff to learn. But I find this chapter really exciting because, you know, like last week, we learned how to actually do a little bit of CSS, right? And we took like a really kind of boring looking stuff and started making it look like something. And when you start to add images in and throw in even more CSS, you can start seeing like, wow, it really looks like something now, and you start getting excited. And for me, that's always cool to get you excited about what we're doing. It excites me, so hopefully it excites you. And I do have my Chapter 4 PowerPoint already downloaded here, so I'm just bringing it up on screen. All right, so we have, there's 52 slides, holy cow, right? These are our topics for this chapter, right? Create and format lines and borders on web pages sounds kind of simplistic, but it really, simple little things like that can really add to the visual appeal. We're going to add images to the pages. Awesome. We're also going to learn to add some other types of graphics. But we're going to also talk a little bit about how to really make your images effective on web pages, because it's not just as simple as like grabbing a photo off your phone and throwing it on a web page. I mean, you can do that, but it's not really ideal. Also, like what image formats work well. How to make your images still be large but more efficient in file size. We're going to set images as backgrounds and also use images to do hyperlinks, which I think are all really cool things. And frankly, things that users expect when you go to a website. I mean, these are just kind of givens for a lot of people. Additionally, we're going to look at some effects with CSS3. You know, so background images, rounded corners, box shadow, text shadow, opacity, and gradients, and what those things even mean if you've never heard of those terms before. Because I know for some people, if you don't have a graphics background, you talk about opacity and you're like, what? What's opacity? Or what's a gradient? And then we'll also talk about how to configure colors using these other color tools that I've kind of alluded to in the past, but we haven't really delved into it very heavily. We're also going to look at a couple of other HTML5 elements, including some tags that are fairly new to HTML5 when the standard came out, which I think are pretty cool. Where to find your graphics and how to create them, and really what kind of tools you might use to work with graphics. And that's kind of an important thing too. So let's move to our first little snippet that we're going to play with. And we're going to actually learn a new tag. And we're going to learn what we call a self-closing tag called the HR element. And HR stands for horizontal rule. And what that thing creates is basically a line across your HTML pages, just like this. You notice where they've decided to put theirs is right above the footer. And that's probably not a bad place to put one. So why don't we go ahead and actually do that. So I have my index page open. And I think it might look nice to do that right at the bottom, just like they're doing. And so I see my footer is right here. So it starts on line 52. And I'm just going to throw in the HR tag like this. I'm going to save that. And I am going to bring this up in a browser. And I'm trying to remember my Dreamweaver chops here, because it's been a little while since I've been poking around in here. And I'm going to go down to the bottom now. You can see right across the whole page there is this horizontal rule. And it's just basically a line that they place on the page. So whether or not you like that or not, it is an effective way to show a division in content on a page. And it is one of these tags that we call a self-closing tag. So it doesn't formally have like HR and then a closing HR. Although it is important to note that if you were working in wake up, right? Never like it when we see not responding. But if you were working in XHTML 1.0 or 1.1, you would be forced to do a self-closing tag like this. So you might like see some legacy code out there that has this format of it. And just so you know, that works just fine in HTML5 if you do it this way, but technically you really don't need to. But I'm pointing out that if you did, let's say, work on an old application that you're trying to revamp and you saw that, not to freak out to it. Okay, so that's the horizontal rule. Another thing that you might want to consider doing with some of your elements, just to create a little bit of like both visual appeal or separation from other content, is to apply a border to your stuff. So here they have an example of an H2 element, and notice what they're doing here is they're actually applying a style, and they're showing you really two concepts here simultaneously. So I want to make sure that you're aware of that. First of all, they're applying three different styles, but they're doing it with one line of code. And CSS has built into it the ability, if you know the short codes, you can kind of hotwire your code a little bit and not have to type out each style. So really what they're doing here is they're declaring three separate styles: border width, border style, and border color, and doing it all in one statement. So let me explain what that means. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to try to copy paste that, but it must be a graphic, so I can't do it. So I'm going to actually just go to my code and just type it in manually. Now, I'm going to be putting all my styles directly into my style sheet at this point. I'm no longer going to be embedding it into the code unless I need to. So I'm going to come over here to my sidebar and open up my CSS file, and it loads up inside of the editor like this. Now they were applying that style to an H2. And I'm trying to remember, do I have any H2s on my page? And I do. I have one right here. So you see I have an H2 right here in the document. So I'm going to come over to the style sheet now, and I'm not sure where I'm going to place this. I might actually place this up near the top somewhere. So I'm going to declare a style for H2, set up my curly brackets, and then I'm going to start typing. So what they're trying to demonstrate to us is this ability to type these commands either separately or in a combination. So they have border width, border style, and border color. So I'm going to do each one of those. So let's start with width. Now width, typically for borders, will be declared in a number of different ways. My favorite way to do it is to actually declare the pixel size, and they use the size of 2 pixels, and I think that's actually a pretty good size for many borders. So I'm going to say border width 2 pixels. They also want us to do border style. Okay, so border style will come in a few different flavors, and what I like about a higher end product like Dreamweaver, which I'm using right now, is the moment I type in a CSS style, they give me a drop down quick list of all the different styles that are available. I don't have to remember them, but here's some of the options: dashed, dotted, double, groove, hidden, inherit, inset. And actually none of the ones that I want are listed there, so I'm actually going to use solid as my choice. So it's just going to create a solid line. The other option they wanted us to choose was border color. So once again, I'm going to type in my border dash color. I'm going to bring up the built-in color picker. Some products have this tool available, some don't. I know in the book they kind of pick kind of like a red. I'm not really sure I want a red. Maybe I feel more like a, I don't know, maybe some sort of green today. And you can see how it's just kind of like moving around the palette here and choosing that green that I want. So I'm just kind of picking one at random. And it gives me the hex code, right? And once the hex code's locked in, I just press enter and it drops it into my CSS. Alright, so however you get your color in there, you just want to pick a random color for right now. You can type in blue or green or red or purple or something like that. That's fine too. Let's go ahead and do a Control S to save. I'm also going to do the same thing on my HTML document. Then I'm going to go back out to the browser and do a refresh. And actually the change that I made is up at the top, but you can see now I do have a border that goes around. You can't really tell that it's that dark green, but it is. You know, so if I zoomed in, you probably can see it a little bit better that it's actually that dark green. But that just creates a way for you to, create some definition and separation of the content that you've created to make it stand out. Now I put a border around an H2, and frankly I don't think I normally would do that, but I might put a border around some other stuff just because I think it looks better. One thing I often put a border on is when the whole window or the container. I showed you how to do that by declaring each style separately, but what they're showing you in the PowerPoint is this. I'm going to comment out my CSS, and I want you to notice here that CSS comments are done a little bit differently than HTML comments. So notice what I did is I put in a / and an asterisk. That's where it starts, and then I finished it with an asterisk and a slash. So anything in between those two is now effectively ignored as a style. But I'm leaving it in there as an example for you. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do what we call the short code version of this, which is where they just declare border. Okay? And then inside there, I can say 2 pixels, solid, and then use the same hex code, 1F523B, and cover all 3 of those things all at once. Now it takes a little bit of practice, frankly, to learn what those short codes are for different CSS styling elements, but any of the ones that you see that have like dashes in them typically have a shortcode way of doing it. Borders are a real common one to do that way. Fonts are really common to do that way. Backgrounds are real common to do that way. We'll experiment with all of them, but I just want to show you both techniques. The book kind of talks about the fact that you can separate them, but a lot of times when you go out into the field and you're looking at somebody else's code, most pros will jump to the shortcode way of doing it. Why? Because it's just faster and it does the same thing. Okay? All right. Another thing that they want to demonstrate with you here is this concept of what we call block level elements and inline elements. And we haven't talked about that much yet. But there's some things that we create in HTML that are considered block elements. So real common ones, for example, all the heading tags are block elements. Paragraphs are block elements. Divs are block elements. And what that means is when you put that object on the screen, by default, it fills up the whole element that it sits within, or the whole screen, all the way across. The next thing that appears in the code below it will appear below it. And the thing that appears above it in the code will appear above it. Right? But that will occupy a whole block or a whole width of whatever object you are within. There are some elements, though, like the anchor tag or like the span element, that are called inline elements and do not occupy the whole screen width. So if I was to put a border around an anchor tag, it would not fill up the whole width of the screen. In fact, if there was text following it, the text following it would just be listed right here. Now, you might start saying to yourself, why on earth would I put borders around my anchor tags? Let me give you an example of why you might want to consider doing it. All right. All right. So first of all, I'm going to go back to my code, and I'm sorry that I'm kind of bouncing around like that. And I'm looking for examples of anchor tags in my code. And right away, right at the top here, I see that my navigation area has a bunch of anchor tags because, you know, we're linking from page to page. But I have that right now in an unordered list. Okay? I could, if I wanted, just declare that all anchor tags should have a border. You know, I'm not really sure I want to do that. But I might want to do that for my menu or my navigation. So here's food for thought, folks. All right, and then this is going to be kind of like a multi-step process here. Right now, this anchor tag sits inside of the nav area, right? Oops, and I collapsed it, and I didn't mean to do that. It sits inside the nav area. So I can write CSS that just directly attaches to those items. So for example, I might write a style that says nav space A. So this indicates that anchor tags inside the nav will get this style. And what I'm going to do to it is I'm going to kind of do what the author did. I'm going to do border. I'm going to make it, you know, 1 pixel. 1 pixel. I'll do it solid again just because solid I think looks best. And then I need some color. Oops. Some color. And I might choose something kind of red for right now, just because it's kind of visible. And I'm just going to go ahead and choose that color. Oops, it got rid of solid though. Okay, so I can type solid back in. We'll close this up, put a semicolon at the end. And I'm going to save this, and I'm going to jump back over to the browser once again and then do a refresh. So you see how they all have a little wrapping around it. But notice that unlike the H2 above, it is not going edge of the screen to edge of the screen. Because H2 is a block level element and anchor tags are an inline element. So just to demonstrate what that means to be inline is if I decide that, you know, after this anchor tag, I just want to type in some text, you know, I'm just throwing stuff in there, kind of nonsense, but to get the point, it'll just appear right after it. It wouldn't appear on the next line. With an H2, if I put text after my H2, and this is just demonstration, you guys don't have to do this. If I type some text here and save it and refresh, look at where it appears. It appears below it because H2 fully occupies whatever it's sitting inside of, and anything that follows it will have to sit below. Okay, and this can be a little bit frustrating initially when you encounter this, because sometimes you'll want it to be on the same line. You're like, well, how do I make it be on the same line? And we'll learn how to do that. There are ways to do that, but by default, this is what happens. I am going to undo those changes just so you know. I don't want nonsense text inside there. The other thing that's kind of important to note is you should never really have text sitting there that isn't sitting inside of some element. It's always good to put whatever you're putting on the page inside of something. All right. So why might I, go to the trouble of putting a border around my menu items? Well, you know what? I really don't like my menu looking like that, folks. That's not what modern menus look like on web pages, right? Why don't we make it look more like a modern web page? Let's get this UL stuff out of here. I'm going to delete the UL stuff. And you don't have to do this, but I'm just recommending. And I'm also going to get rid of the list item elements. So I'm just kind of manually going in here and deleting those. And then I'm going to go to the end of each line and do the same thing. There are faster ways to do this. You can always do a find and replace if you wish. And I'm hoping that you guys maybe have heard of that. If not, I'll demonstrate that at some other point. And now, look what I'm doing now, right? So it's still inside the nav, right? Anchor tags are all inline elements, correct? Everybody should nod and smile. But if I go back to my page now and do a refresh, look at what I just did. Now they're all on the same line. Hey, wow, it's almost starting to look like a menu. Almost. Right? Frankly, I'm not really crazy about the border. But it's just to show you that you can do it. But I do like the fact that the navigation now is horizontal as opposed to some cheesy looking bullet list. Why? Because that's kind of what we're trained to expect on websites these days. Here's another demonstration. The anchor elements are all inline elements, right? So the reason they're appearing next to each other is because that's what they do. They're inline elements. I put in one, the next one appears, next one appears, it all stays on the same line. The nav element, though, however, is a block level element. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I can make this look a lot more like a menu if I style my nav a little bit. So I'm saving my HTML. Now I'm going to style my nav. I'm scrolling down through my CSS to make sure I don't have any other nav stylings put in here. So I'm going to create a new style now just for the nav element. And I'm going to start by first declaring a background. And we've done this already a little bit. So I'm going to declare a background color. And gosh, what color would look good on this? I'm not really sure. I'm kind of thinking like a black maybe, or something really dark might be kind of nice for a menu bar. So I might kind of like bring my slider up here a little bit, kind of like a charcoaly gray kind of thing. And you know what? I'm going to switch out of hex mode, and we're going to talk about this later. I'm going to switch to RGB mode. See how it just generates the code for me? Isn't that wonderful? And just press enter. It's a different way to declare color. But we'll learn about that in a minute, so don't freak out. Okay, just roll with me. Right? And then, because I'm going to make the background dark, I want to change the color of the text to be light, right? But you know what? All the text is on the anchor tag. It's really the anchor tags I want to be light colored. So I'm actually going to put the color here on the anchor tags. And you know what? Antique white might be just perfect, so I'm just going to choose that. Not really sure, but we'll find out. All right, I'm going to save my work. I'm going to go back, do a refresh. All right, kind of getting there. You know what? Now I hate the borders, right? Those got to go. Agreed? All right, horrible. So let's go in there and get rid of that. All right, but you know what? Here's what I like to do whenever I work on CSS and I'm in development mode, is I never delete my code. I just leave it in there and I comment it out. Because you know what? If I want to go back, I don't have to retype it. If I was going to release the site, I might go through, hire an intern probably, to go through and remove all the comments that aren't needed. But you know, sometimes I've deployed projects where I have all my comments, I just leave them in there, I don't care. Because it kind of leaves a trail of what you've done and where you've been, and it gives you that undo capability, folks, to go back and mess with stuff. Saving again and refreshing. All right, looking a little more like a menu, right? All right, there's some issues, okay? But we haven't learned the styling elements to control it yet. But one thing that you could do, because I look at that and go, well, it kind of looks like a menu, but all the words are kind of swished together, so they kind of really doesn't look like a menu. You know, it's like micro issues here, right? So what I would do primitively, initially, if you guys are following along with my examples, is I would do a little bit of spacing. But here's the problem. If I put in one space, it'll read it. If I put in more than one, what happens? It ignores it, right? It just reads one space. So typically what you end up having to do is putting that non-breaking space character, right? And then once you have one of them typed in, I can put a few of them after each link, like that. And this is a real primitive technique, mind you. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you do this professionally like this. However, it does achieve the effect. In fact, I'm noticing I could probably put a couple before the first link, and that would probably help that. So let's do a refresh there. Okay, now, hey, now it's starting to look like a menu, right? All right, the other thing I'm going to think about here is I'm working on this one page, but I want all my pages to look the same, right? So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back here to my HTML code, and I've changed the nav section. And really, it's just the nav section alone that I've changed. So I'm going to copy all the code from that. And then I'm going to open up my other two pages. So I'm going to open up About. And I'm going to change the stuff inside nav. I'm just going to paste it in. And move that one there. I'm going to fix that, whatever. Let's open up Contact. Do the same thing there. And then in this product, I have the capability of doing a save all. Notepad++ have this, most code editors do. And then all the pages that I just changed, I can go back to the browser now. Let me do a refresh. And then I'm going to start clicking through my pages. And you see now I have a consistent looking menu. I don't have a gallery page yet, right? But now my menus look the same across all pages. As we proceed, I'm going to be tweaking this, but I'm just starting to give you those ideas, like how we get closer to, like, you know, like looking like a, you know, proper website, or aesthetically pleasing one at the very least. All right, moving on. Make one little example here, and I think this is pretty pertinent. You know, because as designers, we tend to work usually with one coding tool, and we usually check our work with one browser. And you know what, folks? That's a mistake. When you're doing this kind of work, if you're really tweaking visual design, you should have Chrome open, Firefox open, Edge open. If you have a Mac, open up Safari. Heck, if you got Opera, load up Opera. If you got Brave, load up Brave. Whatever. Check it on your phone. Check it on your iPad, your Android tablet. Yeah, you check it on all. But the point here is that sometimes the border look of a border can look different on different browsers. This has gotten better over the years, but it's still, there's a difference. Generally speaking, you know, in Firefox, this is what things will look like depending on what style you pick for your borders. But you might go to a different browser and it might look a little bit different. Sometimes that little bit different is enough to break your page, unfortunately. So what it really requires is thorough testing as you're doing your work. You know, you just have to try it in different browsers and take a look. All right. Interesting thing about working with borders is I not only can apply a border all the way around an object. Okay, so here's where it gets even more interesting. I can selectively choose which side I'm applying the border style to. Oh my God, so I can do a different border for the top, a different border for the left, a different border for the right, and a different border for the bottom. Yep. So it gets a little bit overwhelming when you start thinking about the fact that you can selectively control any side of the box that goes around an object. But at the same time, it's kind of cool because it allows you to create some really interesting little effects. So one example that I might show you, well, they have one here, right? So some people, instead of putting the heading or the border all the way around the heading, might say, well, you know what? Maybe it just looks better on the bottom. You know what? And I think, honestly, for an H2 like that, that might be kind of a good look. You know? So why don't I just go back to my CSS, and instead of applying it border, which takes it all the way around, I'm just going to say border dash bottom, because I think actually that's probably a pretty wise design choice. So when I come back here and I do a refresh, you know, that does look a little better, doesn't it? Yeah, I think that's all right. I can live with that. The other box, I mean, it shows that you can create it, but I didn't think it was necessarily the best design choice. What I've also seen some people do kind of creatively is when they select just like one border, I see some people like will make like a left border or something and make it super thick, so it kind of creates like this little like visual element of like a box or something on the edge. I think that's kind of a neat effect too. So like, for example, maybe I could do that for this link. So that link in my code, this one here, right? I can actually apply the style to this paragraph, but in order to do that, I'm going to create a class for it. And I'm going to call it, I don't know, border example 1. It is a little bit verbose, but at least I know what it is. So I'm just going to copy that class identifier there, and then I'm going to go over to my style sheet, and I'm just going to put it right here for right now. It doesn't really matter where you put it. And because it's a class, remember, if you're attaching a style to a class, you start with a period first, and pasting in the name, putting in my curly brackets. And what I might do is something like this. I might do border and border left, and I might make it really obnoxiously large, like 10 pixels. That's pretty large for a border. I might do solid and then red, just throwing out a color. Okay. Save it, go back to the browser and take a look. Okay, it didn't work. Why not? Did I type that right? Border left, 10 pixels, solid red. Oh. See what I didn't do? I didn't save my index file. So I'm going to save my index file. I think I'm saving my index file. There we go. Now it's saved. So now when I come back and do a refresh, there it is. All right. A little cheesy. You know, but you maybe have seen effects like this before. But you can do all sorts of stuff. It's just a creativity thing. I mean, right now I look at it and go, well, the V is touching the red thing. It looks horrible. 10 pixels maybe isn't big enough. But these are all little tweaks that you can make. So one thing I would do is I would probably put like a non-breaking space here to force a space in front of it. Heck, you know, I might even do 2. And then I'll save that, go to my style sheet, and then instead of making it 10 pixels, I make it more like 20. Save it, do a refresh, and there, you know, got a thing. All right, so whether you like that or not, it's not really the issue. I'm just showing you possibilities, folks. What it does effectively do is, you know, it draws attention to it at the very least, and that's kind of part of it. It also shows that you can apply borders selectively on any side and kind of do a lot of really interesting things with it, honestly. All right? Another thing you'll be noticing as we start to add definition to the elements that we're working with is sometimes things seem a little congested. Okay? So you notice here that the top example, they added an additional styling element, and I kind of threw this in last week too with the container, is this thing called padding. And what padding does is it adds space inside the element to give the stuff inside of it a little more breathing room. And from an artistic standpoint and a visual standpoint, it's really kind of a psychological thing, frankly, because we're really kind of appealing to like this intuition that we have in our brains that things look comfortable. Like if I'm like even like setting like objects on the table here, you know, I might not choose to put my stapler right on the edge or my tape dispenser. I might like move it in a little bit. I'm kind of giving it some padding. I'm moving it in away from the edge. Now I feel more comfortable looking at it because it doesn't look like it's going to fall off the table, and I can actually read or see the content more clearly. And so this is the example that they're showing here. So the one thing that they were doing before is they were putting a border around H2, but you know that border is kind of tight and it didn't look really comfortable. Well, we changed it so it's just bottom only. But you know what might benefit a little bit from padding is this menu, right? Because those words are really close to the top and the bottom of the box. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of padding to my menu. So I'm going to go to my CSS now, and to the nav element, I'm going to add padding. I don't want to add too much. I'm thinking 5 pixels is probably good. So let's save that. And let's take a really quick refresh here and see how it, even that little bit of extra spacing, how much more comfortable it is for your eye to look at it now. Now, one little piece of advice I give students as they start to play with controlling the spacing around objects, as a general rule of thumb, a lot of the examples that you'll read about will tend to push padding amounts that are really small, like what I just did. But the truth is, I've discovered over time that ample padding and margins and spacing really makes a huge visual difference on a page. Give the stuff room to breathe. If you don't believe me, take a look at like a well laid out magazine or web page and look at the amount of space they put around their objects. It's usually pretty significant, and it usually makes a huge difference. In fact, I would maybe say that change that I just made of 5 pixels might be a little conservative, and I did that on purpose, frankly. Now I'm bumping it up to 10 pixels, and then look at the results in the browser afterward. That looks much better to me. Now you might look at it and go, I totally disagree. Well, you're wrong, sorry. No, I'm kidding. You know, some of it is very subjective, frankly, but you have to play with it. All right, folks, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and continue. So please do a 5-minute walkabout.